I'm video.
Oh, on video. Oh, you're video?
Yeah.
Sure.
Okay, so you've been to Gaza?
I've been to Gaza. I've also been to Baghdad. And there's such a similarity between U.S. policy denying the Iraqis safe water by bombing all their electrical plants, medicine, water, food, and the consequence of 12 years, the attempt to overthrow Saddam Hussein failed. But it killed, according to UNICEF, in 1999.
Oh, I'm sorry. You're talking about before the war.
I'm talking about 500,000 deaths just from the sanctions.
Yeah.
Now here Israel's...
Now, during those sanctions, of course, Saddam was building massive temples. He was violating every precept of the sanctions.
Okay, how much money, for example, did Saddam Hussein spend on building palaces, according to us, Madeleine Albright? Do you know?
Nope.
It comes to 4 cents a day per person. Now, that's not the reason that people were starving.
Okay.
It's not a wise policy in terms of public relations, and not that I'm a supporter of Saddam Hussein. I'm a longtime member of Amnesty International. You're going to run out of your memory. But I'm also a longtime supporter of B'Tselem. Do you know B'Tselem?
Never heard of it.
B'Tselem is a Hebrew word. It's a Jewish-Israeli human rights group based in Jerusalem. B'Tselem means in the image of. It comes from the Bible, in the image of God. They're not a religious group, but they're kind of like they are a human rights group. They're the ones that said bombing an electrical plant or denying electricity by denying fuel for an electrical plant is a war crime, is what they said. It's a human rights violation. I think so too. Because you can't process sewage, you can't pump water without electricity. And our doing it to the Iraqis and Israel doing it to the people in Gaza will have the same effect. It makes people angry and frustrated, not at Hamas and Saddam Hussein, but at the people that are putting that policy in place. Tell us about you, George.
Okay, well...
And what's your connection with Israel?
I actually have no connection other than, you know, I'm opposed to terrorist actions of any kind. You know, Israel was started by the was actually not started, but was essentially chartered by the United Nations, I guess is the best way I can put it. I'm not really a historic authority. It was rejected immediately by Israel's neighbors. Israel fought a war of independence, which was basically a war of self-defense against those neighbors who lost. After they lost, then they decided to accept the UN partition, but Israel, rightfully so, decided to annex the lands they had gained in that war. Which
1967.
No, I'm talking about 48. The original borders were actually more like settlements in Arab land, like we're talking about Israel in the West Bank right now. They were isolated settlements. Some of them were pretty large, but they were still isolated settlements within the area of what we call Israel now. And after the war in 48, they were able to consolidate those into a much larger area and accepted that as their own land. Israel has fought only defensive wars. After
Sinai?
As far as I know, it was a preemptive war, but still defensive.
No, not the 67 war.
Oh, yeah.
Not that war. Israel's cooperation with Britain and France in the Sinai campaign, a war to take over the Suez Canal with the U.S. and Russia together.
In the 67 war, of course, Israel took Gaza and took the West Bank and Jerusalem, annexed Jerusalem as their capital. Historically, obviously, they have a right to. You know, maybe nowadays people objected to that, but you know, that was their decision. They won the war. They get the claim to victory.
What's the question? There are a lot of conflicts in the world. I'm interested why, in particular, not to criticize you, but why Israel? Are you Jewish?
No, I'm Christian.
You're Christian. Are you a Christian Zionist?
I believe in the rights of Israel to exist, yeah.
Well, there's a category of people that believe that the apocalypse is coming, and it's going to be centered in Israel, and believe that out of Christian...
Well, that's biblical.
Yes, you believe that.
It's biblical.
Yeah. Is that the reason for your support of Israel?
No. The reason for my support of Israel is because I believe that Israel has a right to exist. They are defending themselves, and I support them defending themselves in this war on terror that we are also a part of. They are fighting on our side, not the terrorist side like Hamas and Hezbollah.
I really support Israel's right to exist. That's not a question. I have relatives in it. I mean, I speak the language.
You realize that Hamas does not, in any form at all.
I realize that. Okay. Actually, the PLO never did either, so they changed their position.
They still don't.
No, the PLO.
It took them years to change their charter after Camp David.
Right.
And even now, there are factions within the PLO who fight against Israel, who have no desire to see Israel succeed.
Actually, I'm very encouraged. There's a man named Iraqi who just celebrated his 85th birthday. He's a real hero. He's an Israeli Jew, fought in the war of 1948, was wounded, and for years he's been working to do what he can to make peace between Israelis and Palestinians. He just recently wrote that if, and they didn't do it in 1967, but if the Arab states had adopted the Saudi Arabian peace plan, announcing that all of these Arab countries will sign peace and make recognition with Israel and accept Israel's right to exist within its borders.
Which is all Israel has ever asked.
Well, what are the borders? The Saudi Arabian plan is if Israel will accept what are internationally recognized as Israel's borders, which is the borders of the Green Line in 1967, before, that is not Gaza, not the West Bank, and a little one-to-one exchange of small territories.
And the surrender of Jerusalem, right?
Not the surrender of Jerusalem, but the division of Jerusalem as defined in the UN mandate, which is East Jerusalem, which is an Arab section. I've been there. I've actually seen, there's just another bad story of Israel confiscating a Palestinian home to give to us every day. I do, because this has been my issue. I used to import $10 million a day. They used to be years ago an exporter of food, but they converted their economy to rely on oil. They were wealthy in oil, and they'd buy a lot of food. Okay? Suddenly, you take all the electrical plants out of it, and you impose sanctions. You can say anyone can import and give them food. Now, $10 million a day is $365 million, no, $3,650 million, $3.6 billion a year. Okay? That's 10 times the budget of care worldwide. Okay? You can say to them, you can import all the food you want, but if you don't allow them to sell their oil to buy the food, or buy water, or buy medicine.
Well, isn't that what oil for food was? They sold the oil, except that Saddam sold it for, made bribes out of it. Kofi Annan's own son profited from that.
I don't, we'll leave that out for a second, because that's petty. We're talking maybe $100,000 or
It's still profiting.
Yeah.
At the expense of the Iraqi people, who you obviously care so much about.
I do, because you know how much we allowed, the United States allowed the oil for food program to amount to. Both Bob and I know and met with the heads of the oil for food program, an Irishman and a German. And they both, the first two heads, resigned their position to protest what we had done. 53 cents a day is what we allowed them to sell their oil per person per day in Iraq, is how much money we allowed them in the oil for food program.
Okay.
Now, I don't want to go into too many details because we're going to burn up your camera.
Yeah. Yeah.
This is probably going up to the Mossad.
No, it goes to geobent.blogspot.com.
Oh, good.